The crack of a hand across an old man's face echoed through the diner like a gunshot.
Get your hands
81 years
You're
old,
dead.
a veteran who'd bled for this country, and no one moved. No one spoke. Just silence, thick, shameful silence. But what that coward didn't know was simple. The old man's son was coming. And he wasn't coming alone. Before you hear how this story ends, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, and stay until the end. Because justice. Sometimes it wears leather and rides thunder. George Branson's coffee cup hit the table harder than he meant it to. The kid at the counter was screaming again. Third time in 5 minutes. His voice cut through every conversation, every quiet moment like a knife through paper. $3? Are you kidding me? You're trying to rip me off. Dolores stood behind the register with her hands shaking. Sir, the menu clearly states, I don't care what your menu says. You think I'm stupid? George's jaw tightened. He'd been watching this for 10 minutes now. Watching this punk kid couldn't be more than 25 tear into a woman who'd probably served coffee in this diner longer than he'd been alive. Please, sir, if you could just... Shut up! Just shut up! George set his cup down, looked directly at the kid, didn't say a word. Just looked. The kid felt it, turned around. Their eyes met. What are you looking at, old man? George didn't blink. Someone who needs to learn some manners. The diner went quiet. The kid's face flushed red. He took 3 steps toward George's booth. You got something to say to me? I already said it. Yeah. The kid leaned over the table. His breath reeked of energy drinks and cigarettes. You think you can talk to me like that? George met his eyes, steady, calm. I think you should apologize to the lady and pay your bill. Or what you gonna make me, Grandpa? No. George's voice stayed level. But you'll regret it anyway. The slap came fast. Open palm. Right across George's face. Hard enough that his glasses flew off and skittered across the table. George's head snapped to the side. Pain exploded across his cheekbone. His vision blurred. For a second, he was back in Korea. Back in the cold. Back when getting hit meant you hit back twice as hard. But his body wouldn't move. His hands stayed on the table. His legs wouldn't stand. He was 81 years old. And all the fire in the world couldn't change that. That's what I thought. The kid straightened up, grinned. Keep your mouth shut, old-timer. George touched his cheek. The skin was already hot, swelling. He could taste copper in his mouth. No one moved. The trucker in the corner kept eating his eggs. The couple by the window stared at their phones. The businessman at the counter folded his newspaper and walked out without paying. Dolores stood frozen behind the register, one hand over her mouth. Tears ran down her face. The kid laughed, tossed a crumpled $5 bill on the counter. Keep the change, sweetheart. Buy yourself a personality. He grabbed his jacket and walked out. The door jingled behind him. Cheerful, like nothing had happened. George sat perfectly still. His glasses lay on the table in front of him. One lens cracked straight down the middle. He picked them up, folded them carefully, set them down again. His hands weren't shaking. That was the worst part. They should be shaking, should be doing something, but they just lay there on the table like dead things. Dolores came over. Her hands trembled so badly the coffee pot rattled against the cup as she poured. George, I'm so sorry. I'm so... Not your fault. I should have called someone. I should have... Who would you call? George looked up at her. His left eye was already starting to swell. Police. They'd take a report. Kid would be gone by the time they showed up. And then what? But he hit you. I know what he did, Dolores. She wiped her eyes with her apron. At least let me get you some ice. I'm fine. You're not fine. Your face... I said I'm fine. His voice came out sharper than he meant it to. Dolores flinched. George immediately regretted it. I'm sorry. I need a minute. She nodded, walked away quickly, disappeared into the back. George heard her crying. The sound carried through the kitchen door. Quiet, muffled, ashamed. He wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, wanted to tell her he'd seen worse, done worse, survived worse. But he couldn't move, couldn't speak. His throat felt like someone had filled it with concrete. A young woman 2 booths over got up and left, didn't finish her breakfast, didn't look at him. An older man near the door stood up, started walking toward George, got halfway there, stopped, turned around, left. George watched it happen, watched them all leave, one by one. He'd become poison, a reminder that bad things happen, that sometimes nobody helps, that getting old means becoming a target. His father's voice echoed in his head. His father who'd worked the docks for 40 years, who'd taught George to throw a punch at age 7, who'd said, "Never let them see you weak, never let them walk away." George had failed him, failed himself. He pressed his palm against his burning cheek. The pain was sharp, immediate, real, good. At least something was real. Minutes crawled by. The clock on the wall ticked like a countdown. George counted each second, each beat of shame. Dolores came back, brought him fresh coffee he didn't want, set it down gently. "George, I know. You don't have to stay." "Where am I going to go?" She didn't have an answer for that. A new customer walked in, looked at George, looked at the empty diner, sat as far away as possible. George picked up the coffee cup, put it down without drinking. His jaw hurt too much. Dolores leaned against the counter. "That kid, he comes in here sometimes, always causing trouble, always treating people like garbage." "You know his name?" "Derek something. I heard him on the phone once. Derek Russo, I think." George filed that away. Didn't know why. Didn't know what he'd do with it. "He drives a black Honda," Dolores continued. "I see it in the parking lot sometimes. He parks across 2 spaces, like he owns the place." "Dolores, why are you telling me this?" She looked at him with red, swollen eyes. "Because somebody should do something, and everyone's too scared. I'm too old. You're the only one who stood up. And look where that got me." She opened her mouth, closed it, walked away again. George sat in the silence. The diner felt massive now, empty even with people in it, like he was sitting in a cathedral built for ghosts. He thought about his son, wondered what Tom would say if he could see him now. Probably nothing. They hadn't spoken in 23 years, not since the divorce, not since the custody battle, not since Tom chose his mother and a life George couldn't follow. Tom had been 17 the last time they spoke. Angry, hurt, full of the kind of rage that only comes from feeling abandoned. "You signed me away," Tom had said. "Signed the papers like I didn't matter." George had tried to explain. The courts, the lawyers, the impossible choice. But Tom didn't want explanations. He wanted a father who fought harder. George hadn't fought hard enough. And Tom disappeared into a world of motorcycles and leather, and a family George didn't recognize. Now George was 81, sitting in a diner with a bruised face, wondering if his son would even care if he knew. Probably not. The door opened. George didn't look up. More customers, more people who'd pretend he didn't exist. But the footsteps were different. Heavy, deliberate, boots that meant business. Then more boots, and more. The diner went silent. George looked up. 12 men stood in the doorway, all wearing leather vests, all covered in tattoos and road dirt and the kind of scars that told stories. Hell's Angels. The patches made it clear. The Death's Head, the MC rocker, the bottom rocker with their chapter. The man in front was massive, 6'3", 230, shoulders like a linebacker, face carved from stone, eyes that scanned the diner like he was calculating threats. Those eyes landed on George and stopped. The big man's expression changed. Something cracked in that hard face, something that looked like pain. He crossed the diner in 4 long strides, stopped at George's booth, stared down at him. George stared back. His heart hammered in his chest. The man's eyes were blue, steel blue, like his mother's, No. No, it couldn't be. Dad. The word came out broken, raw, like it had been buried for decades and finally clawed its way free. George couldn't breathe. Tom. Tom dropped to one knee beside the booth. Up close, George could see the lines around his eyes, the gray creeping into his beard, the weight of years and miles and decisions that couldn't be taken back. What happened to your face? George's throat closed. Tom, what happened to your face? Tom's voice dropped, got quieter, more dangerous. It's nothing. Don't lie to me. Tom's hand hovered near George's shoulder. Didn't touch, afraid to. Who hit you? Tom, it doesn't matter. It matters to me. The words hung in the air between them. 23 years of silence, of anger, of regret so deep it had carved holes in both their hearts. And now this impossible moment. Some kid, George said finally. His voice shook. He was giving Dolores trouble. I said something. He didn't like it. Tom's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. He hit you because you said something. I'm old. Easy target. You're a veteran. Tom's hand finally landed on George's shoulder, gentle, careful. You're my father. George's eyes burned. Tom, I haven't been your father in a long time. Doesn't change what you are. One of the other bikers stepped forward, older, gray beard, eyes that had seen everything. Tom, we got business. This is business. Tom didn't look away from George. Tell me what he looked like. Tom, tell me. George sighed, the weight of everything pressed down on him. Buzz cut, maybe 25, cheap tattoos, gold chain, black Honda. Tom nodded slowly, looked up at the gray-bearded biker. Hawk. Yeah, I know him. Derek Russo. Wannabe tough guy. Hangs at O'Malley's. Tried to prospect for the Diablos last year. They kicked him out for running his mouth. Where's he live? I'll find out. Tom stood, looked down at George. I'll be back. Tom, don't do something stupid. I'm not. Tom's eyes were hard now, cold. I'm doing something right. He turned to leave. The other bikers fell in behind him like a wall of leather and iron. Tom, wait. George tried to stand. His legs wobbled. He grabbed the table. Tom. Tom stopped at the door, looked back over his shoulder. You remember what you taught me when I was a kid? George's chest tightened. What? You taught me two things. Respect is earned, and family protects family. Tom's voice cracked. I haven't been much of a son, haven't been there when you needed me, but I'm here now. Tom, and nobody puts their hands on my father. The door closed behind him. The sound of Harley engines exploded outside, loud, angry, thunder promising a storm. Then they were gone. George stood there gripping the table. His legs shook, his heart hammered, his face burned. Dolores appeared beside him, tears streaming down her face. He came back. Your boy came back. George couldn't speak, couldn't move. 23 years. 23 years of wondering, of regret, of nights staring at the ceiling asking himself if he'd made the right choice. And his son had called him Dad. His son had called him Dad, and knelt beside him and touched him like he still mattered. George's legs gave out. He sat down hard. His cracked glasses sat on the table in front of him. His coffee had gone cold, but something warm was spreading through his chest. Something he hadn't felt in decades. Hope. Dolores brought him water. Drink this. You're in shock. He was. His hands shook as he lifted the glass. Water spilled over the rim. What's he going to do? Dolores whispered. I don't know. Should I call someone? Who? She didn't answer. They both knew there was no one to call. This was beyond police, beyond rules. This was something older, something that lived in the blood. This was family. The trucker who'd watched the whole thing without helping stood up, walked over, stood awkwardly by the booth. Sir, I I should have said something earlier. I'm sorry. George looked up at him. You're sorry now. I didn't want trouble. So you let an old man get hit. The trucker's face went red. He walked away quickly, left money on his table and disappeared. The couple by the window did the same, avoiding George's eyes, ashamed but not enough to have done anything when it mattered. George watched them go, felt something hard settle in his chest. These were his neighbors, his community, people he'd lived beside for years, and when it mattered they'd looked away. But Tom hadn't. Tom had looked at him and seen his father, had dropped to his knees and called him Dad like no time had passed at all. George pressed his hand against his burning cheek. The pain was still there, but it felt different now, felt like a bridge, like the thing that had brought his son home. 23 years. 23 years of silence. And it took a coward's slap to break it. Dolores sat down across from him. What are you going to do? Wait. For what? For my son to come back. What if he doesn't? George looked at her. He will. He didn't know how he knew, didn't know where the certainty came from, but it was there solid as stone. Tom would come back, because that's what family did. Even broken family, even family that hadn't spoken in decades, blood called to blood, and his son had finally heard it. George picked up his cracked glasses, put them on. The world was blurry through the damaged lens, but he could still see. He could still see what mattered. Outside, the sun climbed higher. Traffic rolled past. The world kept spinning like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Inside that small-town diner, inside George Branson's chest, a fire had been lit. Not the fire of youth, not the fire of anger, the fire of hope. His son had come back. And whatever happened next, George knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't sitting in this booth alone anymore. He was a father again, and God help anyone who didn't understand what that meant. George sat there for another 10 minutes, maybe 15. Time moved strangely now. Each second stretched and compressed like he was living outside normal reality. Dolores kept bringing him things he didn't ask for. More coffee, a plate of eggs, toast, like food would somehow fix what had broken inside him. You should eat something, she said. I'm not hungry. George. Dolores, please. She backed off, went back behind the counter, started wiping things that were already clean. Nervous energy, fear disguised as productivity. The diner was nearly empty now. Just George, Dolores, and an older woman in the back who'd been reading the same page of her book for 20 minutes. George's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. A text from his neighbor. Saw police cars on your street. Everything okay? Police. George's chest tightened. What had Tom done? He started to type a response. Stopped. What was he supposed to say? That his son, who he hadn't spoken to in 2 decades, had just rolled into town with a motorcycle gang. That right now Tom was probably hunting down the kid who'd slapped him. He put the phone away without responding. The door opened again. George looked up, expecting customers. Instead, it was a cop. Young, maybe 30, clean uniform, hand resting casually on his belt near his radio. He scanned the diner. His eyes landed on George, on the bruise spreading across his face. The cop walked over. Sir, I'm Officer Martinez. I received a call about an assault. George shook his head. Nobody called about any assault. Someone called from this diner 15 minutes ago. Said an elderly man was attacked. George looked at Dolores. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Kept wiping the same spot on the counter over and over. I'm fine, George said. Martinez pulled out a notepad. Sir, that's quite a bruise. Can you tell me what happened? I fell. You fell. That's right. Martinez looked at him like he was trying to read a book in a foreign language. Mr. Branson, George Branson. Mr. Branson, if someone assaulted you, I need to know. We can press charges. Nobody assaulted me. I tripped, hit my face on the table. Sir. Officer, I appreciate your concern, but I'm 81 years old. I'm clumsy. That's all there is to it. Martinez studied him for a long moment. His eyes shifted to the booth, to the cracked glasses on the table, to George's hands, which were clenched into fists. "Mr. Branson, I know what assault looks like, and that's not a fall. It is if I say it is." The cop sighed, closed his notepad. "I can't help you if you don't cooperate. I don't need help." "That's not what it looks like from where I'm standing." George met his eyes, held them. "Officer Martinez, I've been taking care of myself since before you were born. I think I can handle one more day." Martinez wanted to argue. George could see it in his face. But what was he going to do? Arrest an 81-year-old veteran for refusing to file a report? "If you change your mind, I won't." Martinez handed him a card anyway. "My number's on there, day or night." George took it, set it on the table next to his broken glasses. "Thank you for your concern." The cop left. The door jingled behind him, cheerful, oblivious. Dolores rushed over the second he was gone. "Why didn't you tell him? Why didn't you?" "Because it's done. It's not done. That kid is out there and my son is handling it." The words came out harder than he meant them to. Dolores flinched. "I'm sorry," George said quietly. This isn't for the police. Not anymore." "What's Tom gonna do?" "I don't know. George, if he hurts that kid, then that kid should have thought twice before hitting an old man in a public place." Dolores looked at him like she didn't recognize him. Maybe she didn't. Maybe George didn't recognize himself anymore. 23 years. 23 years of being the quiet veteran, the polite customer, the man who never caused trouble. And now his son was out there wearing colors and riding with a gang and probably about to do something that couldn't be undone. And George couldn't bring himself to care. His phone buzzed again. Different neighbor. Bunch of bikers just rolled through. Looked serious. "You know anything about that?" George turned his phone off. Couldn't deal with it. Couldn't think about anything except the look in Tom's eyes when he'd called him Dad. The door opened again. George's heart jumped. But it wasn't Tom. It was the businessman from earlier. The one who'd left without paying. He walked up to the counter, pulled out his wallet, and handed Dolores 3 20s. "For my meal earlier," he said. "And for being a coward." Dolores took the money slowly. "Sir, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He glanced at George, couldn't hold his gaze. "I should have said something. Should have done something. I'm sorry." He left before George could respond. 5 minutes later, the trucker came back, walked straight to George's booth, set a $50 bill on the table. "That's for your glasses, for whatever it cost to replace them." His voice was gruff, ashamed. "I was wrong. Shouldn't have just sat there." George looked at the money, looked at the man. "Keep it." "No, I said keep it." The trucker's face went red. He backed away, left the 50 on the table anyway, walked out quickly. Dolores stared at the money. "George, what's happening?" "Conscience," George said quietly. "They're trying to buy theirs back." "Will it work?" "No," because George knew something they didn't. Guilt doesn't wash away with apologies or cash. It sits in your chest like a stone, gets heavier every year. He knew. He'd been carrying his own stone for 23 years. Outside, the sound of motorcycles grew louder, closer. George's heart started hammering again. His hands gripped the edge of the table. The door opened. Tom walked in first. Alone, no other bikers behind him. His face was unreadable, hard, like carved granite. He crossed the diner in 3 strides, sat down across from George without asking. They stared at each other. "Did you find him?" George asked. "Yeah." "And?" Tom leaned back. His leather vest creaked. "We had a conversation." "What kind of conversation?" "The kind where I explained some things, about respect, about consequences, about what happens when you put your hands on people who can't defend themselves." George's throat tightened. "Tom, what did you do?" "Nothing he didn't deserve." "That's not an answer." Tom's eyes were cold, empty. "You want details? You want me to tell you exactly what happened?" I want to know my son isn't going to prison. I'm not going to prison. How do you know? Because Derek Russo isn't going to file a report. He's not going to talk to cops. He's not going to say a word about what happened today. Tom leaned forward. He's going to wake up tomorrow with some new perspective on life. And every time he looks in the mirror, he's going to remember why respect matters. George studied his son's face, looking for something. Regret, guilt, anything that looked like the boy he'd raised. But that boy was gone. Had been gone for 23 years. I don't know whether to thank you or be terrified of you, George said quietly. You can be both. Dolores appeared with 2 cups of coffee, set them down without a word, disappeared again. Tom wrapped his hands around the cup. His knuckles were bruised, split in places. Fresh blood. George pointed at them. Those from Derek. Some of it. And the rest from hitting things that deserved to be hit. They sat in silence. The coffee steamed between them. Neither one drank. Why'd you come to this diner? George asked finally. Of all the places in this town, why here? Tom shrugged. Good coffee. Quiet. Reminds me of the place Mom used to take me when I was a kid. Your mother hated diners. I know. Tom's lips twitched. Almost a smile. That's why I like them. George felt something crack inside his chest. Not breaking. Opening. I've been coming here for 11 years, George said. Every Thursday. Same booth. Same order. I know. George froze. What? I've known for 8 years. I've seen you here, watched you from my bike sometimes when I rode past. The words hit George like a physical blow. You knew I was here, and you never what came in talked to you. Tom's voice was rough. What was I supposed to say, Dad? Hey, sorry I haven't called in 15 years. How's life? You could have said anything. Could I? Tom looked at him, really looked at him. You signed those papers. You gave me up. The court. I don't care about the court. Tom's voice rose, cracked. I was 17 years old and my father chose to walk away. I didn't choose. Yes, you did. You had options. You had lawyers. You had chances to fight harder. But you signed the papers, and you walked away, and I spent the next 6 years wondering what I did wrong. George's eyes burned. Tom. And then I stopped wondering. I stopped caring. I built a new life, found a new family, men who showed up, who had my back, who didn't sign me away when things got hard. Is that what you think happened? That's what I know happened. George's hands shook. He pressed them flat against the table. Your mother was going to take you to California. She was going to put 3,000 miles between us. The lawyer said if I fought, if I dragged it out, you'd spend years in limbo. Years of court battles. Years of watching us tear each other apart. Tom said nothing. I signed those papers because I thought it was the right thing. I thought giving you stability with your mother was better than putting you through hell with me. George's voice broke. I didn't choose to give you up. I chose to let you go. And there's a difference. Is there? You tell me. You're the one who watched me for 8 years without saying anything. Tom flinched. Direct hit. They sat there. 2 broken men trying to figure out how to be father and son again. Why today? George asked. Why did you finally come in today? Because I saw what happened. I was outside, getting ready to leave. I saw that punk hit you through the window. George's chest tightened. You saw it. I saw all of it. Saw you stand up for Dolores. Saw him hit you. Saw everyone look away. Tom's voice dropped. And I saw you sitting here alone afterward, looking like you'd lost something you couldn't get back. I had. What? My dignity. Tom shook his head. No, you didn't lose anything. That kid tried to take it, but you still had it. You sat there with your head up, didn't cry, didn't run. You took it. That's not dignity. That's just being too old to fight back. That's where you're wrong. Tom leaned forward. Dignity isn't about fighting back. It's about who you are when nobody's watching, when nobody helps, when everyone walks away. He paused. You had more dignity sitting in that booth than that kid will have in his entire life. George couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. I should have come in sooner, Tom continued. Should have walked through that door 8 years ago. Should have had the guts to face you. Why didn't you? Pride, anger, fear. Tom laughed bitterly. All the reasons that seem so stupid now. They're not stupid. They kept me from my father for 23 years. Yeah, they're stupid. George reached across the table. His hand trembled. He placed it over Tom's bruised knuckles. Tom went completely still. I'm sorry, George whispered, for all of it. For the divorce, for the papers, for not fighting harder, for every birthday I missed, every Christmas, every... Stop, Tom's voice cracked. Just stop. I need you to know. I know. Tom turned his hand over, gripped George's. I know, Dad. I've always known. They sat like that. 2 men holding hands across a diner table, neither one caring who saw. Dolores was crying behind the counter. She wasn't even trying to hide it. The older woman in the back had abandoned her book, was watching them with wet eyes. What happens now? George asked. I don't know. Do we just pretend the last 23 years didn't happen? No. Tom squeezed his hand. We acknowledge they happened. We carry them. But we don't let them write the next chapter. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. So we'll figure it out together. George felt tears slip down his face. He didn't try to stop them. Didn't care. His son was holding his hand. His son had called him Dad. His son had come back. Nothing else mattered. I'm still angry, Tom said quietly. About a lot of things. That doesn't just go away. I know. And you're still going to be stubborn and impossible sometimes. Probably. But I want to try. I want to know my father before it's too late. It's not too late. You're 81, Dad. With the life I've lived, the enemies I've made. Yeah, it might be too late. Tom's grip tightened. But I'm here now. And I'm not walking away again. George nodded. Couldn't trust his voice. They finished their coffee in silence. But it was different now. Not the heavy silence of regret. The comfortable silence of 2 people who didn't need words. Dolores brought them pie. On the house. Tom raised an eyebrow. What kind? Apple. With ice cream. Is there any other way? Tom grinned. Actually grinned. Mom always said pie without ice cream is just disappointment on a plate. Your mother was right about some things, George said. Don't tell her that. She'll never let me forget it. They ate the pie, talked about small things, safe things. The weather, the diner's new menu, anything that wasn't the last 23 years. But underneath it all, something was building, something neither one wanted to say. Finally, Tom set down his fork. I need to tell you something. George's stomach dropped. What? The club I'm in, it's not just a social thing. It's not just riding bikes and drinking beer. I know what the Hells Angels are, Tom. Do you really? Tom's face went hard again. Because it's more than leather and motorcycles. It's family. It's code. It's dangerous. Yes. And illegal sometimes. Yeah, Tom didn't answer. Didn't need to. George took a breath. I don't care. What? I don't care what you do. I don't care if it's dangerous or illegal, or if every cop in 3 states has your picture on their wall. George met his son's eyes. You're my son, and I just got you back. I'm not going to waste time judging the choices you've made to survive. Tom stared at him. You mean that? Every word. Even after today, after what I did to Derek. Especially after today. Tom's eyes went wet. He looked away quickly, cleared his throat. The club, They're going to want to meet you. Why? Because you're my father. And because what happened today, that's going to be a story. The story of how Tom Branson's old man got disrespected and the angels made it right. Tom looked back at him. You're part of this now, whether you want to be or not. George thought about it. Thought about what it meant to be part of Tom's world, to be connected to something he didn't fully understand. But then he thought about sitting in this booth alone, watching everyone walk away, having no one. Okay, George said. Okay. When do I meet them? Tom smiled. Really smiled. How about now? Now. They're waiting outside. George looked toward the window. Sure enough, 12 motorcycles were lined up in the parking lot. 12 men standing beside them, waiting. They've been there this whole time, George asked. Wanted to give us privacy. But yeah, they're waiting. George stood up. His legs were steadier now. His heart was calmer. Then let's not keep them waiting. Tom stood too. They walked toward the door together, father and son, side by side. Dolores called after them. George, your glasses. George looked back at the cracked lenses on the table. Keep them. I don't need them anymore. Because he could see clearly now. Could see what mattered. Could see his son standing beside him. Could see a future that an hour ago didn't exist. They stepped outside into the sunlight. The bikers stood at attention, watching, waiting to see what their president's father looked like. Tom put his arm around George's shoulders. Brothers, this is my dad, George Branson, Korean War veteran, toughest man I know. One by one, the bikers approached, shook George's hand, introduced themselves. Hawk, Razor, Smoke, Animal. Names that meant something in their world. They treated George with respect, real respect. Not the polite kind people give old men out of obligation, the earned kind. Your son talks about you sometimes, Hawk said. Didn't think we'd ever meet you. Neither did I, George admitted. But you're here now, and that's what matters. They spent the next hour talking. The bikers told stories about runs they'd been on, places they'd seen, things they'd done that probably shouldn't be repeated in polite company. George listened, laughed. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Part of something, part of a family again. Finally, Tom checked his watch. We should roll. Got club business. The others nodded, started mounting their bikes. Tom turned to George. You need a ride home. I drove here. Your face is pretty swollen. Should you be driving? I've driven in worse condition. Tom smiled. I believe it. He hesitated. Can I come by tomorrow? Maybe we could have breakfast. Talk some more. I'd like that. Same time, same place. Same booth, George confirmed. Tom pulled him into a hug. Quick, rough, but real. I love you, Dad. Should have said it 23 years ago, but I'm saying it now. George's arms wrapped around his son, held tight. I love you too. They broke apart. Tom mounted his bike. The engine roared to life. All 12 bikes started up. The sound was deafening, beautiful. Tom looked back one more time, gave a small salute. Then they were gone. Thunder rolling down the street, leaving silence in their wake. George stood in the parking lot alone. His face hurt. His body ached. His heart felt like it might explode, but he was smiling. His son had come back, and tomorrow they'd have breakfast, and the day after that, maybe lunch. And slowly, carefully, they'd build something new from the broken pieces of what they'd lost. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. But it was real, and real was all George needed. He walked to his car, drove home carefully. His neighbor was outside, watering her garden. George, I saw all those motorcycles. Are you okay? Better than okay, George called back. Better than I've been in 23 years. She looked confused. George didn't explain. How could he? How could he explain that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best ones, that sometimes it takes a coward's slap to bring a son home? He couldn't. So he just waved and went inside. His house was quiet, empty. But it didn't feel lonely anymore. Tomorrow his son was coming to breakfast, and that changed everything. George didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. Tom's face when he'd knelt beside the booth, the way his voice cracked when he said Dad, the grip of his hand, the bruised knuckles, the promise of breakfast tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word felt impossible, like something that might disappear if George closed his eyes. At 3 a.m, he gave up on sleep, made coffee, sat at his kitchen table in the dark. His face throbbed. The bruise had spread, purple and yellow, ugly, but he didn't care. His phone sat on the table in front of him. He'd turned it back on around midnight. 7 missed calls, 13 text messages, all from neighbors asking about the motorcycles, about the police, about whether he was okay. He didn't answer any of them. At 4:30, his phone rang. Unknown number. George almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello, Mr. Branson. This is Officer Martinez. I'm sorry to call so early, but I need to ask you something. George's chest tightened. What is it? Derek Russo was admitted to the hospital tonight. Someone beat him pretty badly. Broken nose, cracked ribs, lots of bruising. Martinez paused. He's not talking. Won't say who did it. But I have a witness who saw a group of motorcycles outside his apartment around the time it happened. George said nothing. Mr. Branson, I know what happened at the diner yesterday, and I know your son is affiliated with the Hells Angels. If he had anything to do with this, my son had breakfast with me yesterday, that's all I know. Mr. Branson, Officer Martinez, is Derek pressing charges? Silence. Then, no, he's refusing to cooperate. Then I don't see how I can help you. If your son assaulted someone, my son didn't assault anyone. He had breakfast with his father. End of story. Another long silence. Martinez knew he was lying. George knew he knew. But without Derek talking, without evidence, there was nothing the cop could do. Mr. Branson, vigilante justice isn't justice. No, George agreed. But sometimes it's all we've got. He hung up before Martinez could respond. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from something else, something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. Derek was in the hospital. Tom had put him there, and George couldn't bring himself to feel bad about it. What did that make him? He thought about Korea, about the things he'd done there, things he'd spent 60 years trying to forget, things that came back in dreams. He'd killed men, shot them, stabbed them, done what he had to do to survive, to protect his unit, and he'd made peace with it. Eventually. Was this so different? His phone buzzed. Text message from Tom. You awake? George stared at it, typed back. Yes. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Cops call you yes. What did you tell them? That you had breakfast with me? The dots appeared for a long time. Finally, thanks, Dad. 2 words, but they hit George like a physical force. Dad. Tom had called him Dad again. George typed, Are you in trouble? No. All good. See you at 8. I'll be there. George set the phone down, finished his coffee, watched the sun come up through his kitchen window, pink and orange spreading across the sky. A new day, a new chance. At 7:15, he showered, put on clean clothes, looked at himself in the mirror. The bruise was worse in daylight. Spectacular, really. Purple spreading from his cheekbone to his jaw. His left eye was swollen half shut. He looked like he'd been in a war. Maybe he had been. At 7:40, he drove to the diner. The parking lot was already half full. Thursday morning regulars. People who came every week like clockwork, like George. He walked in. Conversations stopped. Everyone looked at his face, then looked away quickly. Dolores rushed over. George, oh my God, your face looks even worse than yesterday. Good morning to you too, Dolores. I'm serious, you should see a doctor. I'm fine. You're not fine. You look like I got hit. I know, it's okay. George headed toward his booth. His booth, where everything had changed yesterday. Someone was already sitting there. An older woman, maybe 70, gray hair, kind eyes. She looked up as George approached. "Oh, I'm sorry, is this your seat?" "It's fine, I can sit somewhere else." No. She started to stand. "I didn't realize. I'm new here. First time at this diner. Really, it's okay. Tom said you'd be coming. He told me to save this booth." She smiled. "I'm Margaret, Tom's mother-in-law." George froze. What? His mother-in-law. Well, ex-mother-in-law, technically. He was married to my daughter Sarah for 3 years. They divorced 5 years ago, but we stayed close. She gestured to the seat across from her. "Please, sit. He should be here any minute." George sat slowly. His brain was struggling to process. Tom had been married, divorced, had a life George knew nothing about. "You look surprised," Margaret said gently. "I am. Tom and we haven't been in touch for a long time." "I know. He told me." She reached across the table and patted his hand. "He also told me what happened yesterday, both at this diner and after. I wanted to meet you, to thank you. Thank me for what? For giving him a reason to be better." Her eyes were wet. "Tom is a good man, but he's been angry for so long, carrying so much hurt. Yesterday when he called me, I've never heard him sound like that. He was different, lighter." George's throat tightened. "I don't think I had much to do with that." "You had everything to do with it." Margaret squeezed his hand. "He's been watching you for years, you know, coming to this diner, sitting on his bike outside, trying to work up the courage to come in. He told you that. He tells me everything. After the divorce, I became the mother figure he needed, the one he'd lost." She smiled sadly. "I know about the custody battle, about the papers you signed. He told me his version. Now I'd like to hear yours." So George told her everything, the divorce, the lawyers, the impossible choice, the years of silence, the regret that sat in his chest like a stone. Margaret listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry you had to make that choice. I'm not sure it was the right one. It was the only one you could make, and Tom knows that now. Yesterday forced him to see it." She wiped her eyes. "Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things." The door opened. Tom walked in. No leather vest today, just jeans and a black t-shirt. He looked younger without the vest, more like the boy George remembered. He saw them sitting together, stopped. "Oh no, what did she tell you?" "Nothing embarrassing yet," Margaret said. "But give me time." Tom slid into the booth next to George. "I should have warned you she was coming." "I'm glad she's here," George said. And he meant it. Dolores appeared with coffee, set down 3 cups. The usual for everyone. Tom nodded. Margaret did too. George realized they came here together, had routines, shared history. "How long have you two been having breakfast here?" George asked. "About 6 years," Tom said. "Every Thursday. Margaret likes the pancakes. They remind me of home," Margaret added. "My mother used to make them just like this." George felt something shift inside him. Tom had been here, in this diner, every Thursday for 6 years, just a few hours before George's usual time. "We were never here at the same time," George said slowly. "Were we?" Tom shook his head. "I made sure of it, came early, left before you arrived." "Why?" "Because I was a coward." Tom's jaw tightened. "Because I wanted to be close to you without having to face you." "That's not cowardice," Margaret said softly. "That's grief. That's a son missing his father and not knowing how to fix it." They sat in silence. Dolores brought their food, pancakes for Margaret, eggs and bacon for Tom, toast and jam for George. "You remembered my order," George said to Tom. "I've been watching you eat it for 8 years. Yeah, I remembered." They ate, talked about small things. Margaret told stories about Tom's marriage to her daughter, about how they'd met at a charity motorcycle run, about how Tom had been awkward and sweet and completely out of his depth around Sarah. She loved him, Margaret said. Still does, I think. But Tom's life, it's complicated. The club, the lifestyle. Sarah couldn't handle it. I tried to leave, Tom said quietly. Tried to walk away from the angels for her. But it didn't work. That life is part of me now. Has been since I was 19. George wanted to ask why. Why the angels? Why that life? But he already knew. Tom had been looking for family, for belonging, for men who wouldn't walk away. Do you regret it? George asked instead. The divorce. Tom thought about it. I regret that I couldn't be what Sarah needed, but I don't regret who I am. The club saved me, gave me purpose when I had none, gave me brothers when I'd lost my father. The words hung in the air, heavy, true. And now, George asked, now that you've found your father again, now I have both, and I'm not giving up either one. Margaret smiled. Stubborn, just like you, George. I'm not stubborn. You absolutely are, Tom said. Yesterday at the diner, most people would have walked away. You sat there, took it, refused to back down even when it hurt. That's not stubborn. That's just being too old to run. That's being strong enough to stay. George looked at his son, really looked at him, saw himself in Tom's face, the same jaw, the same stubborn set to his shoulders, the same refusal to give up even when giving up made sense. They were more alike than George had realized. Officer Martinez called me this morning, George said. Tom's expression didn't change. What did he say? That Derek Russo is in the hospital, that witnesses saw motorcycles near his apartment. What did you tell him? That you had breakfast with me yesterday. Tom nodded slowly. And if he asks again, I'll tell him the same thing. Margaret looked between them. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear any of that. Good idea, Tom said. They finished breakfast. Margaret excused herself, hugged them both. Tom, I'll see you next week. George, I hope I'll see you too. I'd like that, George said. She left. It was just George and Tom again, like yesterday, but different, easier. I need to tell you something, Tom said. About yesterday. About Derek. You don't have to... Yes, I do. Tom's voice was firm. I want you to know exactly what happened. No secrets, no lies. George nodded, braced himself. We found him at his apartment, dragged him outside. I told him exactly what he'd done, who he'd hit, what it meant. Tom's hands clenched into fists on the table. He laughed, said you were just some old man, that it didn't matter. George's stomach turned. So I hit him, broke his nose. He went down, started crying, begging, and I wanted to keep going. Wanted to make him hurt the way you'd been hurt. Tom looked at George. But I stopped, because that's not who I am. I'm not a monster. I never thought you were. Didn't you? Even a little bit? George was silent. Because yes, he had wondered, had feared what his son might have become. I'm violent when I need to be, Tom continued. I've done things I'm not proud of, things you're better off not knowing. But I have a code. Rules I don't break. And one of them is this: I don't hurt people who can't defend themselves. I don't become the bully. But Derek could have defended himself. He chose not to. He chose to curl up and cry and beg. And that's when I knew he'd learned his lesson. Tom leaned back. I left him there. Told him if he ever came near you again, if he ever even looked at you wrong, I'd finish what I started. He believed me. Will he press charges? No. Because he knows if he does, things get worse for him, not better. That's how this works. That's the reality of my world. George processed this, tried to reconcile the man sitting across from him with the image of Tom breaking someone's nose in a parking lot. Are you disappointed? Tom asked quietly. In who I've become? George thought about it, really thought. No, I'm not disappointed. I'm sad. Sad. That you had to become this. That life pushed you into a corner where violence was the answer. That I wasn't there to help you find another way. Tom's eyes went wet. Dad. But I'm not disappointed. You're still my son. Still the boy I raised to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. You just do it differently now. That's a generous interpretation. It's the truth. George reached across the table, took Tom's hand. You came back for me yesterday, stood up for me when no one else would, protected your father. That's not a monster. That's a good son. Tom broke, just for a moment. His face crumpled. He pulled his hand back, wiped his eyes roughly. I don't deserve that. Yes, you do. I stayed away for 23 years. And you came back. That's what matters. They sat in silence. Dolores refilled their coffee without asking. The diner continued around them. Normal life. Normal people. While George and Tom tried to figure out how to be father and son again. The club wants to do something for you, Tom said finally. Do something. A gesture. To honor you. To show respect. I don't need gestures. They want to do it anyway. It's important to them. You're my father. That makes you family. And family matters. George didn't know how to respond to that. What kind of gesture? I don't know yet. They're still figuring it out. But it'll be big. Public. The club doesn't do anything halfway. Tom, I don't want... Dad, please. Let them do this. Let me do this. I've got 23 years to make up for. Let me start somewhere. George looked at his son's face, saw the hope there, the need, the desperate want to fix what had been broken. Okay, George said. Okay. Tom smiled, actually smiled. Thank you. They talked for another hour, about everything, about nothing, about Tom's life with the club, about George's life alone, about the years between them that couldn't be erased but maybe slowly could be bridged. Finally, Tom checked his watch. I have to go. Club meeting. Okay. Same time tomorrow. George hesitated. Tom, you don't have to do this every day. I know you have a life. I want to. If you want to. I do. Then I'll see you tomorrow. Same booth. Tom stood, hesitated, then leaned down and kissed the top of George's head. Quick, awkward, but real. He left before George could respond. George sat there for a long time after. Dolores came over eventually, sat down across from him. You okay? She asked. I don't know. Am I? Your son came back. Your son who you thought you'd lost. I'd say you're better than okay. He's a complicated man. All the best ones are. She smiled. You know what I see when I look at him? I see his father. I see you. The same strength. The same stubbornness. The same unwillingness to let bullies win. He broke someone's nose yesterday. And you broke someone's spirit in Korea, I'd bet. We all do what we have to do to survive. To protect the people we love. George looked at her. When did you get so wise? I've been serving coffee in this diner for 32 years. You learn things. She stood, patted his shoulder. He loves you, George, and you love him. That's all that matters. She walked away. George sat alone in his booth. His coffee had gone cold again. He didn't care. His son loved him. After everything. After 23 years. Tom still loved him. George pulled out his phone, typed a text to Tom. I love you too. Should have said it yesterday. Saying it now. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. 3 dots appeared immediately. I know, Dad. I've always known. George smiled. His face hurt. His body ached. His heart felt too big for his chest. But he was happy. For the first time in 23 years, he was genuinely happy. He stood up, left money on the table, walked toward the door. See you tomorrow, George, Dolores called. Yeah, same time. Same booth. Same booth. He walked outside into the morning sun. His car sat in the parking lot where he'd left it. But he didn't want to go home yet. Didn't want to sit alone in his empty house. So he walked. Down the street. Past shops that were opening. Past people starting their day. Past life happening all around him. And for the first time in years, he felt part of it. Part of the world. Not just an old man waiting to die. He was a father again, and that changed everything. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Mr. Branson, this is Hawk, Tom's friend from yesterday. The club is having a gathering Saturday night. We'd be honored if you'd come. Tom wants you there. George stared at the message. A gathering. With the Hells Angels. With his son's brothers. He typed back. What time? 7 p.m. I'll text you the address. Wear something comfortable. It's casual. George smiled. Casual. To a motorcycle club gathering. He had no idea what that meant, but he'd figure it out. Because Tom wanted him there, and George wasn't missing another moment of his son's life. Not anymore. Never again. He walked back to his car. Drove home. His neighbor was outside again. George, I heard about yesterday. Are you okay? Should I be worried about those bikers? No, George called back. No worries, they're family. His neighbor looked confused. George didn't explain, just went inside. He had 2 days to prepare for Saturday. 2 days to figure out what to wear to a motorcycle club gathering. 2 days to ready himself for whatever came next. But that was okay, because his son would be there, and Margaret, and Hawk and the others. He had family again. Complicated, dangerous, leather-wearing family, but family nonetheless, and that was worth everything. Friday morning came too slowly. George had barely slept again. He kept checking his phone, kept replaying Thursday's breakfast with Tom and Margaret, kept thinking about Saturday night. At 6:30, he gave up on sleep, made coffee, sat at his kitchen table in the pre-dawn darkness. His phone buzzed. Tom, can't make breakfast this morning. Club emergency. I'm sorry. George's chest tightened. He typed back, is everything okay? Will be. I'll explain later. Tomorrow night's still on. I'll pick you up at 6:30. Okay. George set the phone down. Tried not to feel disappointed. Tom had a life, responsibilities, a whole world George wasn't part of. Yet. He finished his coffee, showered, got dressed. By 7:30 he was in his car heading to the diner anyway. Couldn't break the routine. Couldn't sit home alone. The parking lot was full. Friday morning rush. George parked in his usual spot, walked in. Every head turned, stared at his face. The bruise had evolved. Now it was deep purple with yellow edges. His eye was still swollen. George ignored the stares, walked to his booth. Derek Russo was sitting in it. George stopped dead. His heart hammered. Derek's face was worse than George's. Nose wrapped in bandages. 2 black eyes. Stitches above his eyebrow. His lip was split and swollen. They stared at each other. I'm sorry, Derek said. His voice was thick, nasal. I came to apologize. George didn't move, didn't speak. Can you sit down? Please. Derek gestured to the seat across from him. Dolores appeared at George's elbow. George, I can call someone. It's okay. George sat down slowly, kept his eyes on Derek. What do you want? Derek's hands shook on the table. I want to say I'm sorry for what I did, for hitting you, for all of it. You already said that. I know, but I need you to hear it, really hear it. Derek's eyes were wet. I was wrong. I was angry and stupid, and I took it out on you, and I'm sorry. George studied him, looking for the cocky kid from Tuesday, looking for the smirk, the attitude. It was gone, beaten out of him, literally. Why are you here? George asked. Because I can't sleep. Because every time I close my eyes, I see your face. The way you looked at me after I hit you, like you were disappointed, not scared, Not angry, just disappointed. Derek wiped his eyes roughly. My grandfather was a veteran. Vietnam. He died 3 years ago. And when I saw you sitting there after I hit you, all I could see was him. And I realized what I'd become. What's that? The kind of man he would have been ashamed of. Silence stretched between them. Dolores stood nearby, watching, waiting to intervene if needed. Your son did this, Derek said, gesturing to his face. He and his friends. They found me Tuesday night. I know. He told me if I ever came near you again, if I ever even looked at you wrong, he'd kill me. Derek's voice cracked. I believed him. You should. I'm not here because I'm scared. I mean, I am scared, but that's not why I'm here. Derek leaned forward. I'm here because what I did was wrong, and I needed to look you in the eye and say it. I'm sorry, Mr. Branson. I'm sorry for hitting you. I'm sorry for being a coward. I'm sorry for being the kind of man who picks on old people to feel tough. George took a breath, let it out slowly. Why were you screaming at Dolores? What? Tuesday, before you hit me. You were screaming at Dolores over $3. Why? Derek's face crumpled. Because I'm broke. Because I just lost my job. Because my girlfriend left me and took everything. Because I'm 26 years old and I'm living in a studio apartment that smells like mold and I can barely afford to eat. He laughed bitterly. $3 felt like the end of the world. So you took it out on a waitress? Yeah, I did. And then I took it out on you. Derek's hands clenched. I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to explain. Explanation isn't the same as excuse. I know. George looked at this broken kid across from him, saw himself at 26, young, angry, lost, coming home from Korea with no idea how to be a person anymore. What do you want from me? George asked. Forgiveness. I don't deserve forgiveness. That's not what I asked. Derek was quiet for a long moment. I don't know what I want. I just knew I had to come here. Had to try to make it right somehow. You can't make it right. What's done is done. I know. But maybe I can be better. Maybe I can stop being the kind of person who does things like this. George thought about Tom, about the choice he'd made 23 years ago, about walking away, about all the ways they'd both failed and hurt each other and still found their way back. You want to be better? George asked. Yes. Then be better. Stop talking about it. Stop apologizing. Just do it. George leaned forward. Get your life together. Find a job. Treat people with respect. Become the man your grandfather would have been proud of. That's how you make it right. Derek nodded. Tears ran down his swollen face. Okay, I will. And Derek? Yeah. Don't come back here. Don't come near me or Dolores or this diner. You want to be better? Do it somewhere else. Derek flinched, but he nodded. I understand. He stood up, pulled out his wallet, set a $100 bill on the table. For your glasses, and for Dolores, for being an asshole. I don't want your money. Please, it's all I can do. Derek backed away. Thank you for listening. Thank you for not having your son kill me. He left quickly. The door jingled shut behind him. George sat there, staring at the $100 bill, feeling strange, hollowed out. Dolores slid into the seat Derek had vacated. What just happened? I don't know. Are you okay? I don't know that either. She picked up the 100, looked at it. Should I keep this? Split it with the cook. You both earned it putting up with him Tuesday. George, I don't want it, Dolores. I don't want anything from him. She nodded, put the bill in her apron. He looked different, broken. Tom broke him. Is that good or bad? I don't know. George rubbed his face, winced when his hand hit the bruise. Maybe both. Dolores brought him coffee. Breakfast. He ate without tasting it. His mind was spinning. Derek's apology, his tears, the look on his face. Tom had done that. George's son had beaten a man bloody for George, to defend his honor, to exact justice, and George had thanked him for it. What did that make them both? His phone buzzed. Tom again. Everything okay? Dolores texted me. Said Derek showed up. George typed back, I'm fine. He apologized. Want me to come? No. I'm okay. See you tomorrow night. You sure? Yes. George put his phone away, finished his breakfast, left money on the table, walked out into the Friday morning sun. His phone rang. Unknown number. George answered. Is this George Branson? Yes. Who's this? My name is Robert Chen. I'm a reporter with the local paper. I heard about what happened at the diner Tuesday. I'd like to interview you. George's stomach dropped. How did you hear about it? I have sources. It's my job. Look, Mr. Branson, this is an important story. Elderly veteran assaulted. Bystanders do nothing. Then a motorcycle club steps in. People need to hear this. No. I'm not interested in being interviewed. I'm not interested in this becoming a story. Leave me alone. George hung up. His hands were shaking. A reporter. Jesus. This was the last thing he needed. His phone rang again. Same number. George declined the call. A text came through. I'm going to write the story with or without you. Better to have your voice in it. George blocked the number, got in his car, drove home faster than he should have. When he got home, his neighbor was waiting on his porch. George, there was a reporter here earlier, asking about you, about Tuesday. I didn't tell him anything. I promise. Thank you, Carol. What's going on? What happened Tuesday? Nothing. Just a misunderstanding at the diner. That's not what the reporter said. He said you were assaulted, that the Hells Angels got involved. George, are you in trouble? No, I'm fine. Everything's fine. But it wasn't fine, and they both knew it. George went inside, locked the door, sat on his couch with his head in his hands. This was spiraling, getting bigger, becoming something he couldn't control. His phone rang. Tom. George answered immediately. Did you hear about the reporter? Yeah, Hawk just called me. How did they find out? I don't know. Someone must have talked. I'll handle it. Tom, you can't threaten a reporter. I'm not going to threaten him. I'm going to have a conversation. Tom paused. Dad, this might get messy. The club doesn't like attention. Doesn't like people digging into our business. What does that mean? It means we might need to keep a low profile for a while. It means tomorrow night might need to be postponed. No. The word came out harder than George intended. No, I've waited 23 years. I'm not waiting anymore. Tom was quiet. Then, okay, we'll figure it out. I'll pick you up at 6:30 tomorrow. We'll deal with the reporter situation after. Tom, I don't want you doing anything illegal. I won't, I promise. Just trust me. Okay. They hung up. George sat in his empty house, wondering how a slap in a diner had turned into this, how his quiet life had exploded in 4 days. The rest of Friday crawled by. George tried to watch TV, couldn't focus, tried to read. The words swam on the page, tried to nap. His mind wouldn't shut off. At 6 p.m. his doorbell rang. George opened it. Margaret stood there holding a casserole dish. I heard you had a rough day, she said. Thought you could use some company and a home-cooked meal. George felt his throat close. Margaret, you didn't have to. I know, but I wanted to. She walked past him into his house. Kitchen. Straight back. She headed that way, started pulling out plates, setting the table, moving around his kitchen like she owned it. How did you know where I live? George asked. Tom told me. Also told me you were alone and probably not eating right and definitely overthinking everything. She smiled. Was he wrong? No. Then sit. Eat. Talk to me." They sat, ate. The casserole was incredible. Chicken and rice and vegetables in some kind of sauce George couldn't identify, but tasted like home. "This is amazing," he said. "My mother's recipe. I make it when people need comfort." Margaret studied his face. "Derek came to see you this morning." "How did you—" "Dolores called me. She's worried about you." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're overwhelmed. Your whole world changed in 4 days. You're allowed to not be fine." George set down his fork. "I don't know what I'm doing, Margaret. I don't know how to be Tom's father. I don't know how to be part of his world. I don't know what I'm supposed to do at this gathering tomorrow night. You're supposed to show up. That's all. Just show up. What if I don't fit? What if they look at me and see some old man who doesn't belong? They'll look at you and see Tom's father. That's all that matters to them." Margaret reached across the table, took his hand. "George, these men, they're not monsters. They're not criminals. Well, some of them are. But mostly they're just men who found family in an unconventional place, just like Tom did. Tom said the club saved him. It did. When Sarah and I met him, he was broken, angry, lost. The club gave him purpose, structure, brothers who wouldn't leave." She squeezed his hand. "But there was always a hole, a place where his father should have been. And nothing could fill it. Not Sarah, not me, not the club, only you." George's eyes burned. "I don't know if I can be what he needs." "You already are. You showed up Tuesday. You let him back in. That's all he's ever wanted." They finished eating. Margaret cleaned up despite George's protests, made him tea, sat with him in his living room while the sun set outside. "Tell me about the custody battle," she said. "I only know Tom's version. I want to know yours." So George told her. Everything. The details he hadn't told Tom. The nights crying, the lawyers who said he'd lose, the judge who clearly favored Tom's mother, the impossible math of fighting a battle he couldn't win versus giving Tom stability. "I thought if I let him go," George said, his voice breaking, "he'd be okay. He'd have his mother, a stable home, a chance at normal. But what if I was wrong? What if letting him go ruined him?" "You weren't wrong. You were a father making an impossible choice with no good options." Margaret's eyes were wet. "And you didn't ruin him. He's complicated, damaged in some ways. But he's also loyal and strong and capable of incredible love. You gave him that foundation. Even if you weren't there, you gave him the tools to survive. How can you be sure? Because I've known him for 8 years. I've seen him at his worst. And even at his worst, he's good. Fundamentally good. That doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from you." George broke. Tears he'd been holding for 4 days spilled over. Margaret moved to the couch beside him, put her arms around him, let him cry. "I'm sorry," he gasped. "I'm sorry, I don't usually—" "Stop apologizing. You're allowed to feel. You're allowed to grieve the years you lost. You're allowed to be scared of the years ahead." She held him tighter. "But you're also allowed to be happy, to have hope. Your son came back. That's a miracle." They sat like that for a long time. Eventually, George's tears stopped. He pulled back, wiped his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." Margaret stood. "I should go. Let you rest. Big day tomorrow." "Margaret, wait. Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why are you doing this? Helping me? You don't even know me." She smiled. "Because Tom loves you, and I love Tom. And because I know what it's like to lose family and get them back. My son died 6 years ago. Overdose. I thought I'd never recover. But then Sarah brought Tom home for dinner, and suddenly I had someone to mother again. Someone who needed me. He saved my life as much as the club saved his." She touched George's cheek gently. "We're all just broken people trying to find family wherever we can, you and Tom. You get a second chance. Don't waste it." She left. George sat alone in his living room. The house felt less empty now, like Margaret had filled it with something. Hope, maybe, or just proof that he wasn't alone. He went to bed early, actually slept. Dreamed about Tom as a boy, about teaching him to ride a bike, about birthday parties and Christmas mornings and all the moments they'd had before everything fell apart. He woke Saturday morning with a clear head, made coffee, showered, stood in his closet trying to figure out what to wear to a motorcycle club gathering. Jeans, probably. He hadn't worn jeans in years. Dug through his closet, found a pair from a decade ago, tried them on. They still fit. A t-shirt. Something plain. He had dozens of plain t-shirts. Picked a black one. His phone buzzed. Tom, excited for tonight. The brothers can't wait to meet you. George typed back. Nervous. What should I expect? Food, music, stories, family. Just be yourself. They'll love you. What if they don't? They will. Trust me. George wanted to believe him. Spent the rest of the day trying to calm his nerves. Failed completely. At 5:30, he started getting dressed. The jeans felt strange. The t-shirt felt too casual. He looked at himself in the mirror. Looked like someone trying to be someone he wasn't. His doorbell rang at exactly 6:30. George opened it. Tom stood there in full club vest. Death's head on his back. President patch on the front. He looked dangerous. Powerful. Nothing like the broken teenager George remembered. You ready? Tom asked. No. Good. Neither was I my first time. Tom grinned. Come on, Hawk's waiting. A massive Harley sat in George's driveway, Hawk straddling it. He nodded at George. We're riding, George asked. Unless you want to take your car. George looked at the motorcycle, looked at Tom. I've never been on one. Then today's the day. Tom handed him a helmet. Trust me. George thought about it. About trust. About faith. About following his son into a world he didn't understand. Yeah, he said. I trust you. He put on the helmet, climbed on behind Tom, wrapped his arms around his son's waist. The engine roared to life, vibration through George's whole body. Then they were moving. Wind in his face, world blurring past. Tom's solid presence in front of him. George held on tight, and for the first time in 23 years, he felt completely alive. They rode for 15 minutes, long enough for George's fear to turn into exhilaration. Long enough for him to understand why Tom loved this, the freedom, the power, the pure existence of it. They pulled into a parking lot, a building that looked like an old warehouse. Motorcycles everywhere, dozens of them. Music thumping inside. Tom killed the engine, turned around. You okay? George pulled off the helmet. His hands were shaking. His heart was racing. He was grinning like an idiot. That was incredible. Tom laughed. Told you. He climbed off, helped George down. Ready to meet the family? George looked at the building, heard voices inside, laughter, life. Yeah, he said. Let's do this. They walked toward the door together, father and son, side by side. And George knew no matter what happened next, this moment was everything. This was family. This was home. This was where he was supposed to be. Tom pushed open the door. Light and sound spilled out. Brothers. Tom's voice boomed. I want you to meet someone. This is my father, George Branson, Korean War veteran, toughest man I know, and family. The room erupted. Cheers. Applause. Men rushing forward to shake George's hand, and George stood there, overwhelmed, terrified, and happier than he'd been in decades. His son had brought him home. Hawk was the first to reach George, grabbed his hand in a grip that could have crushed stone. George Branson, it's an honor, sir, a real honor. Then Razor, then Smoke, then Animal. Names George couldn't keep straight, faces that blurred together, all of them treating him like he mattered, like he was somebody. Tom's hand landed on George's shoulder, steadying him, anchoring him. Easy, brothers. Give him room to breathe. The crowd backed off slightly, still close, still watching, but giving him space. George looked around, men everywhere, some young, some old, all wearing the same patches, all looking at him with something George hadn't seen in years: respect. "Come on," Tom said. "Let me show you around." They walked through the crowd. Men clapped George on the back as he passed, called out greetings. "Welcome, Pops." "Good to have you, old-timer. Your son talks about you all the time." George's chest tightened. Tom talked about him. After everything, they reached a quieter corner. Tom handed him a beer. "You doing okay?" "Overwhelmed." "Good. Overwhelmed or bad overwhelmed?" "I don't know yet." Tom laughed. "Fair enough." He took a drink. "Look, I know this is a lot, but these guys, they're my family, and I wanted them to meet you. Wanted you to see this part of my life. Why? Because you're my father, and this is who I am now. I need you to see it, all of it, not just the good parts." George looked at his son. Really looked. "What are the bad parts?" "You'll see some of that tonight, too. We're not choir boys, Dad. We've all done things. Things we're not proud of. Things that would make you ashamed. I'm not ashamed of you." "You say that now." "I mean it." George set down his beer. "Tom, I've killed men in Korea. I've done things that still wake me up at night. You think I'm going to judge you for surviving the only way you knew how?" Tom's eyes went wet. He looked away quickly. "I need to make some rounds. You okay here for a minute?" "Yeah, I'm fine." Tom disappeared into the crowd. George stood alone, drinking his beer, watching. These men were different from anyone he'd known. Rough, dangerous. But there was something else there too. The way they laughed together, the way they touched each other's shoulders, the way they looked out for one another. They were brothers, real brothers, the kind who'd die for each other. George Branson. George turned. A woman stood there. Maybe 40, short dark hair, leather vest like the men wore. But her patches said something different. "I'm Spider. I ride with the club. Wanted to introduce myself." George shook her hand. "You're one of them. One of us," she corrected gently. "Yeah, been riding with these idiots for 12 years. Spider's the best mechanic in 3 states, someone called out. And the meanest poker player you'll ever meet." Spider grinned. "Both true." She looked at George. "Tom's told us a lot about you, about Korea, about what happened last week at the diner." "Last week?" George shook his head. "Feels like a lifetime ago." "That's because it was. You got your son back. That changes everything." She paused. "He's a good man. Best president this club's ever had." "President? You didn't know Tom runs this chapter." "Has for 3 years. Before him, we were falling apart. He pulled us together, gave us structure, made us family instead of just a gang." George processed this. Tom was their leader, their president. He'd built this. "Why are you telling me this?" George asked. "Because you need to understand what you mean to him." Tom's been searching for something his whole life, trying to fill a hole that nothing could fill. Not the club, not Sarah, not anything. Spider met his eyes. Then last week happened, and suddenly he found it, found you. He's different now, lighter, more complete. I don't know if I can be what he needs. You already are. You showed up. That's all any of us really need. Someone who shows up. She walked away, left George standing there with too many thoughts and not enough beer. Margaret appeared at his elbow. "Surviving." "Barely." "Good. That means you're paying attention." She handed him a plate of food. "Eat. You look pale." George took the plate, looked at it. BBQ ribs, coleslaw, cornbread. His stomach growled. "When did you get here?" he asked. "An hour ago. Wanted to make sure everything was ready." Margaret smiled. "I help organize these gatherings. Someone has to make sure these boys don't just eat pizza and drink beer all night." They ate together. Margaret introduced him to more people. Women like Spider, men with regular jobs and families, people who rode with the club but lived normal lives too. It's not all outlaws, Margaret explained. Some of them are, but most are just people looking for community, for belonging. Music started, loud. Someone had set up a sound system, rock music George didn't recognize, but that made his chest vibrate. Tom reappeared. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." They walked outside, behind the building, where it was quieter, just the two of them and the stars. "You doing okay?" Tom asked. "Everyone keeps asking me that." "Because we care." George turned to face him. "Tom, why did you really bring me here? It's not just to meet your friends." Tom was quiet for a long moment. "Because I need you to understand my life. All of it. The good and the bad. And I need to know if you can accept it." "I already told you. I know what you told me. But words are easy. Being here, seeing this, that's different." Tom's voice cracked. "I need to know if you can look at me at this life I've built and still call me your son." George's throat closed. "Tom, because I'm not the boy you raised. I'm not the kid who played baseball and got good grades and wanted to be a doctor. I'm a motorcycle club president. I've been in fights, been arrested, done things that would horrify the man you used to be. The man I used to be is gone, just like that boy is gone." George stepped closer. "We are who we are now, and right now I see my son, a man who leads, who protects his family, who came back for his father when he could have stayed away." His voice broke. "I see my son, and I'm proud of him." Tom broke, just completely shattered. He pulled George into a hug so tight George could barely breathe. "I love you, Dad. God, I love you so much. I love you too. I'm sorry it took us so long to say it." They held each other, two broken men trying to piece themselves back together. Footsteps approached. They broke apart. Hawk stood there. "Sorry to interrupt, but Tom, we got a situation." Tom wiped his eyes. "What kind of situation?" "That reporter, Robert Chen. He's outside, wants to talk to you, says he's writing his story with or without your input." Tom's face went hard. "Tell him to leave." "I did. He won't. Says it's public property. He has a right to be here." George felt his stomach drop. "Tom, don't." "Stay here." Tom's voice was ice. "I'll handle this." "Tom, if you hurt him." "I'm not going to hurt him. I'm going to have a conversation." Tom looked at Hawk. "Get Dad back inside. Make sure he's comfortable." He walked away before George could protest. Hawk gestured toward the building. "Come on, George. Let's get you another beer." "I need to make sure Tom doesn't do something stupid." "Tom doesn't do stupid. He does calculated. Big difference." Hawk steered him back inside. "Besides, if Tom wanted you there, he'd have asked you to come. This is club business. Let him handle it." George reluctantly went back inside, but his mind was outside with Tom, with the reporter, with whatever was about to happen. Margaret found him immediately. "What's wrong?" Reporter showed up. "Tom's dealing with it." Her face tightened. "Robert Chen. You know him. I know of him. He's been digging into the club for months, looking for a story. Any story." She touched George's arm. "It'll be okay. Tom knows how to handle reporters." But George couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go very wrong. 10 minutes passed, then 20. George kept checking his phone. No messages from Tom. Spider appeared. "George, Tom wants you outside." George followed her, his heart hammering, expecting police cars, expecting chaos. Instead, he found Tom and the reporter standing beside a motorcycle, talking. No violence, no anger, just conversation. "Dad, come here," Tom called. George approached slowly. The reporter turned. Young, maybe 30. Eager eyes, recording device in his hand. "Mr. Branson, I'm Robert Chen. I'd like to ask you some questions about what happened last Tuesday." "I have nothing to say." "You were assaulted by Derek Russo. No one helped. Then your son and his motorcycle club tracked Derek down and assaulted him in return. That's vigilante justice. That's a story the public needs to hear." "That's not what happened," George said. "Then tell me what did happen." George looked at Tom. Tom nodded slightly. Permission, or maybe trust. A kid hit me in a diner, George said slowly. My son found out. My son, who I hadn't spoken to in 23 years, came to check on me. That's what happened. Nothing more. And Derek Russo's injuries. I don't know anything about that. Come on, Mr. Branson, everyone knows. Everyone knows rumors, speculation, not facts. George stepped closer. You want a story? Here's your story. A father and son who lost each other found their way back. That's it. That's the whole thing. Chen looked frustrated. That's not the story I came to write. Then maybe you're writing the wrong story. Tom's voice was calm, controlled. You want to write about violence and revenge, fine, but you'll be writing fiction, because that's not what this is. Your club has a reputation. Our club has a family, Tom interrupted. Brothers who look out for each other, who protect the people they love. Is that so hard to understand? When it involves assault. Derek Russo came to the diner yesterday, apologized to my father, paid for his broken glasses. They made peace. Tom's eyes were hard. So whatever story you're chasing, it's done. Over. There's nothing left to write about. Chen looked between them, calculating. And if I write the story anyway, then you'll be writing lies, and my father will sue you for defamation, and the club will make it very clear to your editor that your facts are wrong. Tom stepped closer. Or, you could write the truth. Father and son reconciled after 23 years. Former veteran learns to forgive. Community comes together. That's a better story anyway. That's not what people want to read. Then people are reading the wrong things. Chen studied Tom, then George, then sighed. Fine, I'll write it your way, but I want an interview. Both of you, on the record. Done, Tom said. Tomorrow, at the diner where this all started, 10 a.m. Chen nodded. Put away his recorder. Thank you for your time. He left. George watched him go, then turned to Tom. What just happened? I gave him what he wanted, a story. Just not the story he expected. Tom smiled. Sometimes the truth is the best weapon. They walked back inside together. The party was still going. Music, laughter, life. But something had shifted. George felt it. In the way people looked at him. In the way Tom stood beside him. Hawk appeared with 3 shots of whiskey. A toast. To Tom's old man. To family. To second chances. They drank. The whiskey burned George's throat, made his eyes water, made him feel alive. More toasts followed. More drinks. More stories. Men George had never met told him about times Tom had helped them, saved them, been there when no one else was. Your son gave me a job when I got out of prison, one man said. Gave me a reason to stay clean. Your son paid for my daughter's surgery, another said. Didn't ask for anything back, just did it. Your son is the reason this club still exists, Spider said. The reason we're family instead of just thugs on bikes. George listened, absorbed every word, saw his son through their eyes, not as a president, not as a leader, as a brother, a friend, a good man. Hours passed. George lost track of time, lost track of how many beers he'd had, lost track of everything except the warmth in his chest and the feeling of belonging. Finally, Tom appeared at his elbow. Ready to go home? Already? Tom laughed. Dad, it's 1 a.m. George blinked, looked around. The crowd had thinned. Most people had left. Just a few stragglers remained. Oh. Come on, I'll take you home. They said their goodbyes. Men hugged George. Women kissed his cheek. Everyone made him promise to come back. You're family now, Pops, Hawk said. That means you're stuck with us. Outside, the night air was cool, sobering. George climbed on behind Tom, put on his helmet. The ride home was quieter, slower, like Tom knew George needed time to process everything. They pulled into George's driveway. Tom killed the engine. They sat there in the silence. Thank you, George said. For what? For including me. For letting me see your life. For giving me a chance to be your father again. Tom turned around on the bike. Dad, you never stopped being my father. Even when I was angry. Even when I hated you. You were always there. Always in my head. Always the voice telling me to do better. Be better. I don't know if that voice was mine or yours. Does it matter? You gave it to me. You gave me the foundation. Even if you weren't there to build on it, you laid the groundwork. Tom's voice cracked. Everything good about me, that's you. Everything I've become, that started with you. George couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. Tomorrow morning, Tom continued. 10 a.m., the diner. We do this interview together. We tell our story, the real story, and then we keep moving forward, keep building this, whatever this is. A relationship, George managed. It's called a relationship. Right, one of those. Tom smiled. I'm not good at those. Neither am I. We'll figure it out together. Tom helped him off the bike, walked him to his door, waited while George fumbled with his keys. Tom. George turned. I'm proud of you. Of the man you've become. Of the life you've built. I know I should have said it earlier, but I'm saying it now. Tom pulled him into a hug. I know, Dad. I've always known. They held each other, father and son, finally healing the wounds that had bled for 23 years. Tom pulled back. Get some sleep. I'll pick you up at 9:30 tomorrow. I'll be ready. Tom mounted his bike. The engine roared to life. He gave a small wave and disappeared into the night. George went inside. His house felt different now, less empty, like Tom had filled it with something that would last. He got ready for bed, lay down, stared at the ceiling, his mind spinning with everything that had happened. A week ago, he'd been alone, invisible, an old man waiting to die. Now he had a son, a family, a future, all because some punk kid had slapped him in a diner. George smiled in the darkness. Life was strange. The worst moments led to the best moments. The deepest pain led to the greatest joy. He fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, about the interview, about breakfast with Tom, about all the tomorrows stretching ahead of them. Sunday morning came bright and clear. George woke early, made coffee, actually ate breakfast, put on clean clothes. At 9:30, Tom's motorcycle rumbled into his driveway. George grabbed his jacket and walked outside. Tom handed him the helmet without a word. They rode to the diner in comfortable silence. The sun was warm. The wind was perfect. George held on to his son and felt complete. The diner parking lot was packed, more than usual for a Sunday morning. George saw why immediately. A news van, Channel 7, camera crew setting up outside. I thought you said just a reporter, George said. I said an interview. Chen must have pitched it to the station. Tom killed the engine. You okay with this? George thought about it, about being on TV, about strangers seeing his face, hearing his story. Yeah, he said finally. Let's do this. They walked inside together. Every head turned, conversations stopped. Then someone started clapping. Then someone else. Then the whole diner erupted in applause. George stood frozen. Tom's hand landed on his shoulder. Dolores rushed over, tears streaming down her face. George, Tom, I'm so glad you're both here. Chen appeared with a camera crew. Mr. Branson, Tom, thank you for doing this. We're going to set up in your usual booth. Is that okay? George looked at Tom. Tom nodded. Yeah, George said. That's perfect. They spent the next hour doing the interview. Chen asked questions. George and Tom answered, honestly, openly, about the slap, about the 23 years apart, about finding each other again. What do you want people to take away from this story? Chen asked finally. George thought about it, looked at Tom. That it's never too late. That family is worth fighting for. That the worst moments can lead to the best moments if you're brave enough to let them. And you? Chen turned to Tom. What do you want people to know? Tom's eyes were wet. That my father is the strongest man I know. that he taught me everything worth knowing, that I'm honored to be his son. George broke. Tears spilled over. Tom grabbed his hand, held tight. Chen turned off the camera. That was perfect. Exactly what people need to hear. The crew packed up, left. The diner slowly returned to normal. George and Tom sat in their booth, drinking coffee, eating breakfast, not talking, just being together. Dolores brought them pie. On the house, again. You keep giving us free pie, we're going to eat you out of business, Tom said. Good, then you'll have to keep coming back. She smiled. You two are good for this place. Good for everyone. She walked away. George looked at his son. What happens now? George asked. We keep doing this. Breakfast every week, dinners sometimes, rides on the motorcycle, building memories. Tom smiled. We get to know each other again. For real this time. What about the club? You're part of that too now, if you want to be. I want to be. Good. Because they've already adopted you. You're stuck with us. George laughed, actually laughed. I can think of worse fates. They finished their breakfast, paid, stood to leave. Same time next week, Tom asked. Same booth, George confirmed. They walked outside into the sunlight. Tom mounted his bike. George climbed on behind him. Where to? Tom asked. Home. Your home or mine? George thought about it. About Tom's home, his life, his world. Yours. I want to see where you live. Tom grinned. Okay, hold on tight. They roared out of the parking lot, leaving behind the diner, the interview, the past, riding toward the future, together, father and son, finally whole. And as they rode, George realized something. The slap that had changed everything hadn't been the end of his story. It had been the beginning of healing, of family, of second chances, the beginning of everything that mattered. He held on to his son and smiled into the wind. Life had broken them both. Time had scattered them. Pain had kept them apart. But love had brought them home. And that was all that mattered. That was everything. George Branson had spent 23 years alone carrying regret like stones in his chest. But on a Tuesday morning in a small-town diner, a coward's hand had cracked open those years of silence. And what poured out wasn't just pain, it was possibility. His son had come back not as the boy he'd lost, but as the man he'd become. A man with his own scars, his own family, his own way of protecting the people he loved. Tom had knelt beside that booth and called him Dad. And in that moment, 23 years of distance collapsed into nothing. They weren't perfect. They weren't healed. But they were together. And together meant showing up every Thursday for breakfast. It meant riding motorcycles and meeting brothers who wore leather instead of suits. It meant learning that family doesn't always look the way you expect, but it's family just the same. Derek Russo had taught George something without meaning to. That sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the door to the best thing. The slap that could have broken him became the bridge that brought his son home. Now George had tomorrows to look forward to. Breakfast to share, stories to hear, a son who called him Dad and meant it. He had a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste a single moment of it. Because respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn by showing up, by standing up, by refusing to let the worst moments define you. And love. Love is what happens when you're brave enough to let people back in, even after they've left, even after you've been hurt. George Branson had learned that lesson the hard way, but he'd learned it well. And now, riding through the Sunday morning sun with his son's solid presence in front of him, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he was finally home.